I'm Captain Compton, welcome to Polymath Park. In this video, we'll be continuing our examination of compassion and compersion, and we'll look at the social affecting factors at play in the way that we establish our virtues and identities, starting with a mildly controversial subject.
Social justice.
In the United States, we're leading the charge with the experimental means of establishing what society really wants, and what is socially justifiable because of our free speech laws, and other factors. We have a pretty unique situation going on here, and therefore new therapies and coping techniques will need to be developed as the country gets crazier faster. Let's examine the concept of justice a little bit more here. Many folks have written extensive books on this concept, as truly perfect justice is something that doesn't really exist, or at least it's impossible to truly attain, given the nature of causality and our faulty human memories. As we discussed earlier, one can explain or give reason for anything, completely defeating ownership of one's actions or thoughts, if we take deterministic causality to its furthest extent, which I propose we do when seeking relation and forgiveness, which I propose is a state that we should always want to be in anyways. But these reasons and explanations do not justify their action or thought. This gets tricky when we keep the concepts of ideas, actions, and thoughts aligned throughout this paradigm, though. Our subconscious minds suggest us thoughts all the time, and like that one viewer said, my thoughts will be like thieves breaking into an empty house with nothing to steal. That's the kind of state of equanimity, cognizant equanimity, that we want to instill within ourselves. Perhaps we need to be more critical and dualistic with how we think about the actions of ourselves and others, and be more relational and deterministic with how we think about our thoughts and the thoughts of others. We want to exercise as much deterministic understanding and forgiveness as possible at all times, seeking relation and connection, while keeping society and ourselves from being taken advantage of. Now, this is not how our law system works, nor our traditional or modern sense of societal justice. This is more based around a mindset, like how we should be approaching these situations maturely and patiently, from a place of seeking to find causal explanations of things, and from that, patience and understanding and compassion and connection with others. We do have to exercise proper judgment based on people's habits, not necessarily on what they say or even their actions, but their repeated actions, the patterns that we recognize them performing. The only barriers that we should be putting up from a judgmental point of view is judgment based on the patterns that we recognize that could get us into trouble interacting with this person in the future. And if they need space away from us, then we create that space. The space doesn't necessarily have to be instantly prison. It could be a rehab center or something, productive, but I'll get into more of that later. Sophrosyne is a Greek word. It means a healthy state of mind, characterized as a healthy sense of self-control, moderation, and a deep awareness of one's true self, resulting in true happiness. To attain this, we must be able to reason properly about our actions and thoughts, and form a well-examined sense of inner justice about the world and ourselves in the world, and others' places in the world. We want to instill a cognizant equanimity. We want to be cognizant, consciously aware of ourselves and our surroundings, and match that with equanimity, a calm peace of mind. The Greek idea of justice was always aimed at balancing this external sense of justice about the world, along with this well-examined sense of inner justice based on virtues, balancing the external with others and the internal with oneself. In a recent discussion, Vervaeke says that, quote, "We have a reducing of all the virtues to justice, and just the social aspect of justice, hence the name social justice," end quote. And the problem with this is that this newly formed sense of justice has no real rules. It's quickly established, and we never really know where its conclusions are going to land. One group's terms become microanalyzed, and new terms and qualifiers are created that further segregate people into smaller groups, ultimately creating exclusion, which is the very thing that we want to avoid. Our sense of justice is so heavily influenced by culture and the latest societal standards, and now that anyone can talk to anyone on the globe instantly, those standards are starting to change much faster than society and culture can really handle. This is an issue globally as well as it is nationally. But it's not necessarily bad. Change and progress are necessary, but we want to make sure that it's actually well-examined, progressive moves that we're making. Now, this gets at the Chesterton's fence argument. This is seen a lot in political discussions. Basically, it describes that we should be able to say what's down the road before we ask someone to remove the gate from the road. Now, we're experiencing a major shift in what Vervaeke calls cultural cognitive language. This differs from the idea of a zeitgeist because it concerns more the way that the majority of the culture communicates, verbally, traditionally, perspectively, and otherwise. The rise of the internet and global communication has dramatically accelerated the rate at which our language evolves as well. This can have more downstream consequences than I can possibly list here. I'll leave them to your imagination. The issue I'm really seeing is a massive need to warn people about this change, how change is happening increasingly faster, and how we need to practice mindfulness in order to not be swept away by the accelerating change. We need to establish personal virtues, a moral code to live by, and a personal life narrative and identity. But our culture, traditions, and technology offer us endless sources of superficial meaning and identity based around physical appearance and material gain in the West. Additionally, we aren't encouraged to establish inner justice or introspection habits in public schools either. Philosophy and the humanities are lackluster, if not completely non-existent, in the United States. Being a human is tricky. We say that the thing that separates us from the other animals is our ability to interject and intervene on the stimulus and response. In cognitive behavioral therapy, this is the B in the ABC model, or actions, activating event, belief, and consequences. The belief about the event is the thing that we are always in control of. When we find ourselves judging someone as suspicious or getting weird vibes, where does this feeling come from? We aren't often taught about this. Likely it's something that we just pick up on socially. We don't literally think in our minds, wow, that person is giving me weird vibes. I am feeling stress. That's not how it works. Usually we just feel stressed, or we get creeped out, we get a negatively valenced paresthesia, or hair stands on end, we get a chill down our spine. What normally happens is a base instinct reaction from our established pattern recognition. Someone says or does something strange, and we get red flags that pop up. Before we can think about this, parts of our eyes and mind are picking up on visual lines and changes in those lines. We use the information that we see from the light hitting our eyes to pick up on lines of movement, down to the visual cortex picking up the parallel lines in their crossed arms and the lines in the direction of their shoes. If their shoes are pointing away from us, then it's usually a sign that they're trying to leave. And if their arms are crossed, it usually seems like they're not comfortable with what we're saying. Often these signals don't make it up to the neocortex, and we disregard them. As is common to cases of autism, or in neurotypicals as well as autists, the signals can arrive and overexcite the neurons, causing a subsequent reflex. Or other downstream compensatory mechanisms that have developed over time come online and cause an overreaction, or a fight, flight, or freeze response. But the negative image or idea of a person compounds outside of our awareness. The other person might slip in their speech, and we think, ha, I wouldn't have messed up there. This could also be an ego defense / self-defense survival mechanism as well. This is why we have sayings like, comparison is a thief of joy. We have to watch how we compare ourselves to others. We have to watch how our ego develops. We develop unexamined feelings about a person or situation, and often attribute labels to those people or situations without even realizing it. This is why we must practice intervening in this automatic compounding process. We must practice awareness. We must be mindful of our tendency to compartmentalize. There are thousands of factors that our minds take in all the time, from our biological need to judge. Judgment is a critical survival mechanism, and it can often lead us into these instances of unhelpful reasoning. I use that word unhelpful there quite intentionally. We only get glimpses of this occurring, and we don't really notice until we're told. Again, many of these are ego defense mechanisms, which are based in survival mechanisms, which we don't recognize until we're told. Now, because we know that this is how it works, we can proceed through life from a place of patience and kindness and understanding, and constant forgiveness. Universal forgiveness. To look at it another way, the idea is not, I do right by man as man does right by me. It's, I do right by everyone, regardless of how they're treating me. Full stop. Now, this is literally what Jesus was talking about with the whole turn the other cheek thing. Now, this doesn't mean you have to be a pacifist. Rather, we should introspect on our virtues in order to find something truly worthy of standing up for. And we want to lead by example, don't we? If you go through life expecting equal treatment, seeking balance and retribution, or yin and yang reasoning, we're going to end up having a bad time. We'll end up disappointed at best in all the people that don't meet our particular standards, when nature itself doesn't have any standards. What we want is to exercise proper judgment, and view people with the highest standards possible, and give them the utmost respect simply for being a human. When we don't examine this process, we can end up going through life having our moral compass and our center of judgment formed for us, such that when people do not meet our particular standards, be they religious influenced, be they the dictated rules like the Ten Commandments or something like that, or rules that are written down in any other ancient religious text, or in a law system or a tradition that has been passed down through our family. We're always going to be disappointed when people don't meet those particular standards. So this is why we need to examine our standards and try to examine the value of our standards and which ones we should keep, which ones are helpful and which ones are unhelpful. When we go to apologize, we usually struggle due to shame. Shame feels bad as an evolutionary mechanism that expresses itself in the form of chemical feelings of embarrassment, humiliation, or regret. And these extend out to our parasympathetic nervous system and cause butterflies in the stomach, palms to sweat, our hearts to ache, our hair to stand on end in what's called piloerection, due to negatively valenced paresthesia. Embarrassment could be viewed as an evolutionary means of preventing early hominids from being excommunicated from the tribe, a deeply seated neurobiological survival mechanism, as in,
Ooga booga, me don't want bad feeling again. Me reflect and do better next time, ooga booga.
it is also quite a serious shock to the system when one's entirely constructed worldview is shattered or shaken. It quite literally involves a direct disruption of well-established neuron chains. Cascading patterns that are physical and electrochemical in nature become disconnected, and the pruning and rearranging process of neuroplasticity begins. That is, if the individual is high in openness to new perspectives on the Ocean Personality Test. Otherwise, this disruption will continue to be quite unpleasant as the individual mind resists change, resulting in parasympathetic and emotional consequences downstream. For example, their palms sweating or their heart racing, the fight, flight, or freeze mode starts to kick in. Especially in conversation, we have these modes. It's not just in daily interactions and uses of our physical body that we experience that we can like freeze and enter a state of panic and even panic attack as our hearts race and our eyes dilate, not knowing how to respond and wanting to run, but that's also requiring a decision. And the decision part of the brain is just overreacting, saying no to everything. Or we can be in a state of fight, we can retort with anger and reaction, or we can enter a state of flight and just walk away or run away or do something super awkward like that. These are our monkey blinders. These are our biological imperatives that nature set us up with that we're finally learning how to contend with and not be submitted to. These deep-rooted beliefs and established life narratives are often extremely hard to challenge and very hard for the individual to admit that they have in the first place, because they're so deeply formed without our awareness. It says a lot about our ability to exercise free will in the way that we form life narratives and the way that we form our lives in general. When one attempts to critique another's behavior, one would do well to reflect on the neurochemical struggle that's going on underneath. And like all neurochemical happenings, there is variance in the intensity. Some people come to handle their shame and learn lessons quickly, others take longer. And some never learn, unless they're told directly to their face or publicly humiliated or shamed. Anyways, again, I want to say, once we know all this, we can start exercising more patience, forgiveness, grace, and gratitude and understanding. Well, that's all for now. Thanks so much for sticking through the video. If you find this video valuable and want to show your appreciation, you can donate here. Viewers can access the Polymath Park Patreon here. Programs like this exist solely by donation, so feel free to contribute whatever you feel this video is worthy. Anything's appreciated.